Our next speaker is just another wonderful bundle. So Caroline Bartle has got a wealth of experience that she brings, including being the founder for Spirit Training in the UK, a really important developer and provider of person-centred training for the health and social care workforce. And in New Zealand, Caroline is the director of the Alzheimer's New Zealand Dementia Learning Centre. And Caroline has spent a lot of time thinking, she's a thinker, and particularly about the Jekyll and Hyde, the good and bad of documentation and technology, and how we can accentuate the positive. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Dementia Foundation, for letting me talk to my community as a dementia practitioner. And I just want to say a big shout out to the Alzheimer's New Zealand team, because I see also a few of them on the call as well. I'm just nervously sharing my slides in the hope that I don't have the same issues. Let's try and go here. Okay, can everybody see? Okay, I just need to move everyone. Okay, now I have had a long career in dementia practice, and 20 years of that at least in workforce development. And so my journey to my research has not been usual. It's been unusual. And so I wanted to really share with you a little bit about my story to really get the message across, really how important this work is to me and how important it is to the broader community. So I've got a little video here, and I didn't make it especially, Susan, although I could have done with AI. I think these days, I think you can whiz little things up like that, but I don't know how. So just if we can just play this just quickly. I'm going to have to, phew, I thought we were going to have problems moving it on then. Unlike Tara, I haven't got a huge team of people working. Well, I'm solo on this research journey, but I have got a great team at Alzheimer's New Zealand trying to make some of this work actionable. But there's been a journey to get here. And so for many years, we measured the impact of our programs, and we were delivering about 100 programs a month in our busy months. It got busier during the pandemic, a lot of loss and bereavement programs, advanced care planning. But we invested a lot of our resource into trying to understand what worked and what didn't. And we could see that these are just some of our programs. We could see that actually a lot of the time training wasn't having the impact that we wanted to see. So that started me on a journey, and I think this slide is quite busy, so just bear with me. Um, Over the years, what we did is that we saw things and we adapted and we tried to change things in ways. We learned a lot over those years. I learned a lot over those years. I learned, for example, that it's really important to care for the learner, the carer. We don't work in an easy industry. So thinking about what the front line is like and the challenges they have has to be part of the training strategy. I learned to work alongside people with lived experience, and I trained alongside Paul the other day for the first time. I see that he's on the call as well. And I also learned that it's really important to develop programs that fit the organisation. I learned a lot about using technology as a way of reaching practice. We would deliver one program, then say, go and try something, and then deliver another program. We also learned a lot about job aids. We learned about these infographics, which eventually brought me to New Zealand. And this one here at the bottom, which you can't see very well, but I'm going to talk about a bit later, the importance of reflective practice when you're back in the workplace. We learned all about how to use technology to help people recall and remind, and years and years and years of work, of sharing and learning. And then when I eventually turned to the literature about 8 years ago, I realised that actually we were looking in the wrong place. Now, I'm keeping this session interactive, so I should have mentioned at the beginning the true trainer in me. So there's a link in the chat, and there's also this QR code here. So how do you learn best? How do you learn best? See if we can get some people going on this. I've got 0 at the moment. I'm really hoping it'll work. We did test it earlier. And I have to literally only give you a few seconds because I've got so much material to get through. Have we got anybody on it? No. Yes. Hooray to the 2 or 3 people. Thank you so much. 4. We're getting there. It's like a race. Keep going. Out of 112 people, we can do better than 8. 13. Here we go. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we're getting to where, okay, so those of you that miss it this time around, there will be other opportunities. So I am going to move on, but we can see here that most people learn by doing. Now, if you learn by doing, isn't that strange that most policy and funding in dementia workforce development is directed at training? Imagine if we understood how people learn when they're doing. Imagine how we could harness it for good. Now, dementia training is a subject that's been widely researched, and the research at best is mixed. Clear evidence shows that the ones that do work, they work with what we call multimodal component approaches that embed learning after the training, do things like mentoring, supervision, job aids. So why doesn't training stick? Well, if you think about a washing machine and a part breaks down, you find the faulty part and you replace it. The parts don't change in response to each other, so you can isolate the problem and fix it directly. A complex system like care isn't like that because the parts are alive to one another. Change one thing and everything shifts in response, often in ways you couldn't have predicted. So replace the broken part, i.e. fix training, doesn't work. But our understanding of learning has evolved immensely over the years, but our policy and funding direction hasn't moved with it. Like we used to think that people learn by thinking, by listening to things. But then we started to understand that people learn by working together, and that's where communities of practice ideas evolved. Then we started to understand that people learn by doing, and that's certainly true in dementia practice, we learn a lot by just trialing things and seeing if they work. And that field of work came from notions of play and understanding how people learn through play. We then started to look at the more post-human stuff, which is where I sit, is how the tools of practice that we use influence how we learn. We then started to understand a lot about living systems and complexity theory, and that we understand that actually often what it's about is putting in the right conditions so that the organization can flourish. And this is where the notion of practice leadership that comes out of my research comes from. Now, one of the things that helped me to really think about the theories that I hang my ideas on is something called socio-material. It sounds quite academic, but it's really quite simple. And it's the idea that the things we do aren't just shaped by people, but also the things around us. If you think about these glasses that I'm wearing, a person without glasses might struggle to read, but you add glasses and suddenly they can read and do all these things, and maybe even diagnose patients if they're a doctor. The ability doesn't belong to the glasses or the person alone, but it's the combination of them. So it's a bit like, if you think about all of these things on this slide here is what makes the knowledge worker. If you imagine you're driving to work one day and your GPS takes you off because it glitches down a completely different dark alley, but you just happen to meet the man of your dreams down there. And he turns out to be a prince of a multi-million fortune. You jet off, have children, and live happily ever after, all because your GPS took you in the wrong direction. It's a silly example, but it makes a really serious point. The technologies have a power over what we do. So when I came to this research 8 years ago, and congratulations, Tara, on your oral, doctorate's due in, my doctorate's due in 5 days after 8 years. But these are the questions that I came to. So I wanted to understand how people learn in and through work, particularly in the engagement of their day-to-day problems. I'm really interested in data because I think it can help or hinder the way organisations learn. And I was also looking at what the opportunities were for learning while technologies while people are working. So I carried out my research here in Aotearoa. I've been here for 4 years nearly now. I don't know where the time's gone, with two amazing organisations, aged residential care organisations. I was able to really slow down, and what a privilege it was to be on site, working in workforce development all those years, and actually being on site and just listening and looking at you really soak it up. It's such a privilege and a joy, to be in that environment. So what I did is I was able to really slow down and look at the micro practices in a lot of detail, and I looked at all of these scenarios. And what was analytically significant to me is that the place that had the most learning was the place without any technology. And that is the place directly with care. And when you're a post-human researcher, as I am, you deal with a lot of tensions because, care and technology don't always go very well together. So I spend a lot of my thinking time really trying to push boundaries in very uncomfortable ways. So when I had all of this data and I was looking at it, I was a bit like that crazy professor from Back to the Future, trying to make sense of where all these million threads were taking me. Now, back to this. When you're trying to solve a problem for dementia, rank these knowledge types in order you naturally draw on. When trying to solve a problem for someone living with dementia, rank these knowledge types in order you naturally draw on them. Be honest. Okay, now this is quite difficult to do because we've got a very broad audience here. We've not just got professionals, we've got people with lived experience. So it's interesting to see. We've only had one person so far, so let's see if we can get a few more going. Okay. Um, I just really want you to think about in this situation what the right way of knowing is, but can you access it at the point that you need it? We know, for example, that sometimes getting access to lived experience can be difficult. We know that supported decision making is really underutilized. So, thinking about what knowledge we need at what point is quite critical, and often those things are embedded in the way that our digital infrastructures are set up. So, it's really nice to see lived experience more at the top there. And interestingly, research at the bottom. Maybe that's more to do with the makeup of the people that we've got here now. Okay, so out of all of this research that I had, oh God, I'm going to run out of time. I know it. I didn't have, I wasn't able to go into detail with too much. Um, so one of the things is a virtual meeting. And in this virtual meeting, it was amazing to watch. They were drawing on knowledge from everywhere, best practice guidelines, updates from digital care plans, interdisciplinary input, team experience, research evidence, informal conversations between staff. And what becomes really clear when you observe these meetings is that knowledge needed to solve a problem is never in one place. It's scattered across people, documents, systems, conversations. Um, and what was really clear to me is that clinical problems seemed easier to solve as much of the data was present. But things like distress behaviour and issues around sexuality and intimacy were harder, not because staff didn't care, but because the data just wasn't available. I'm going to skip the next activity because of time. Now, another meeting that I looked at was a family meeting. And so these are really complex topics. So I really had to engage science and technology literature, workforce development, practice development, and dementia. What's best practice in dementia? And I had to bring all of those bodies of literature into sort of sustained conversation. And then I thought, well, how can I make sense of this? So I use something called translation, which is a study of how information moves through organisations, and it's used widely. And it looks at how problems are defined, how people are hooked into the problem, how people work together, and then how information is shared. So in this meeting, you what's happening is that this is a meeting about David. The family are worried, the staff members under pressure. But she's professional, she's knowledgeable, and she's polite, and she's doing her best, working through the systems. She informs the family that David's doing well, his mobility is good, he's eating well, and he's doing well with his activities of daily living. I wrote in my research notes after the reflection,
Thank you.
the really big thing that came across for me was that we're talking about a husband that's lived with his wife for probably 50 years, as if he's a medical case, with no sense that the loss of fear the family feels since the transition into care, or our responsibility to restore that relationship in a way that we care for, the language that we use and the way that we present David to them, as David, not the person that's got this wrong or that wrong or had their bowels open. What they care about is the resident expresses their identity. Now, what I could see when I looked at it through this translation lens is that I thought about what would it be if we could look at it in a different way, a different problem, that David's experiencing psychological distress. The whole process would unfold differently. The conversation might become the central space where knowledge is developed. David's presence would be essential rather than optional, and the tools might also change. Crucially, such a framing would recognise the family's own experience. And, one of the things that's been central in my research is understanding how we bring different forms of knowledge together. Don't know why there's lines over my. Can you see those lines? Don't- my mouse has just decided to graffiti my screen. Sorry. I've got no idea how to rub it out, so we'll have to live with it. Um, So I think about it as a river. I think about the process of translation as a river. The water's the attention, the organizational energy, and each stone represents a moment where the direction is shaped. So if the problem's framed narrowly, the water goes off in completely the wrong direction. And what they're bringing, if we're not bringing the right people in, sometimes people are left on the riverbank, which happens a lot in dementia. The right people are not part of the conversation, and that there can be a professional dominance, sometimes a biomedical dominance. Now, I was utterly in awe of the amazing staff that were present, and this is another little story that another observation that I saw. I'm going to tell you it through story. The caregiver knelt beside the chair as she helped a resident who was unsettled. The woman's hands were restless, tracing the pattern on her blanket. There you go, love, that's bitter. In that moment, there was connection. The woman began to hum a tune. The caregiver joined in. They laughed. They recognized the song. The tension eased. And as the caregiver stood up, she felt a sense of joy. She loved her job when that happened. It felt like good work, maybe even great work, the kind that really gets noticed but stays with you for long after. She thought to herself, I learnt something then, I felt something then. Later at the nurse's station, the noise was constant. The phone was ringing, a trolley rattling past, someone calling out for help. The caregiver worried that all the things she needed to do next. She opened the digital care plan to the record and what had happened earlier. There were the boxes: mood, nutrition, mobility, distress. She hesitated, then clicked calm and moved on. The feeling of the earlier moment, the warmth that filled the room, didn't fit anywhere. The record showed a calm resident, but not the care that made it so or the learning that would build from it. If you look at this practitioner, both bubbles are her job. The left, all of the medical stuff, which is what the recording templates often ask for. The right, empathy, listening, comfort, all of that stuff mostly isn't. But we all know in dementia practice, feelings matter most. But they're not just significant for practice, they're also really important for learning. Um, Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, said he worked out a very long time ago that a message lands through three things: logos, the logic of the facts; ethos, the credibility of the person; and pathos, the feeling, the emotional connection between the story and the hearing it. He argued you need all three, and modern research keeps proving him right. We don't actually remember information the way a computer stores it. We remember what moved us. Emotion is the thing that tags the experience, that keeps going. It tells the brain this matters, hold on to this. That's why stories work, and every good dementia trainer knows that. A story carries a feeling. Now look at what the recording templates do. They capture Lagos beautifully, but they strip pathos out, the fear in the room, the moment someone settled. So when staff write up a shift, the emotional work disappears from the record and the effects of how the information is mobilised. New staff get inducted into the record and the version of the job and not the live one. I'm going to skip some of this so that I can get to the end. Yeah, because I know I'm running out of time.
You're doing great on time. Don't panic,
Yeah, okay.
Caroline.
Yeah. Thank you. So, some of the most important learning I observed was out of the systems altogether, in corridor conversations, during interviews, in quiet moments between incredibly caring staff. One caregiver said to me, I'm crying inside when my residents are sad. Another said, I love my residents. At first glance, these might sound like personal feelings, but they're actually expressions of professional knowledge. In dementia care, staff often come to understand what a person needs through something called emotional attunement. noticing when someone's sad, recognizing when someone needs a hug. But this form of knowledge, it rarely appears in problem solving, not because staff don't notice things, but because they sit outside of the systems. And there's another consequence because when people repeatedly see what good care looks like but can't act on it, it leads to moral distress and that leads to problems in retention. So I see networks everywhere because part of the way I work is something called actor network theory, and I understand care to be and the way that we work as things that assemble together. So I think empathy should be invoked in the assemblages through data stories, through reflective practice, which is where some of the work that this is going to, which from the Workforce Futures Fund, is the development of a new technology that's going to start bringing some of those things to life. Um, Now, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Language can be problematic. We know if you've been in dementia care as long as I have, you either become the language police or you get accosted by the language police. Don't say the word wandering. Don't say the word challenging behaviour. Definitely do not use sundowning. You know, these words influence learning in very powerful ways. But changing language alone does not help. We have to change the systems in which the language is embedded. I just, okay. Um, what I observed is that there's very rich data. We count a great deal and we count it well. But look at what travels through clinical and digital systems, and it's mostly the bio side of the biopsychosocial. That's not a criticism to practitioners. Every good dementia practitioner works from the foundation of biopsychosocial. Um, they get noticed in the room and then they stop there. They do not travel, often a lot of the time. And when things don't travel, sense making gets affected. This is why what good looks like depends on where you stand. What looks like good care to one practitioner can look like good to another, different. Um, the point is that not anyone is doing this badly. The point is that we've built rich infrastructures for the biomedical and we haven't built the infrastructures that need for the psychological and social to travel to. Until we do, the biopsychosocial lens stays a value we hold and our systems can't actually see. Now, I'm going to skip right to the end because I know that I'm running out of time. Um, I just wanted to say that in my work, I did see a lot of power forces at play. So we zoom in and we zoom out, right? And we zoom out and we can see that the problems that this is causing, you know, the regulation and the corporate power, the fact that people are turned into a data point, and the fact that learning isn't always happening close to where people need it. So I started to think about what if we reverse those forces? And two of the main findings from my thesis are this idea of epistemic architecture. And every organisation already has an architecture, but it's often an arrangement that's made by accident, by compliance. I'm asking us to think about how we create it in a way that invokes empathy in ways, and this is where Cora sits in. The second is something called the Digitally Informed Practice Leader. And at Dementia Learning Centre, we've just launched our practice leadership programme. I do want to give it a little bit of a plug at the end. The challenge that they challenge the reflex that every practice problem needs training. Because they know where the real learning actually happens, not in the classroom, but in the flow of work. They cultivate professional curiosity. That's what they do. And they're very important in terms of reducing incidences. So I'll skip this, but just quickly, imagine if you had a technology that could do all of these things, that could help you to think about how did I feel? How did the person feel? What was going on in the environment? How can we support someone to be enabled, independent? What is the learning? How does that learning get shared across the organisation? And so all of this has come to, we're fortunate at Alzheimer's New Zealand to have funding to develop the Cora project. And we are in our co-design phase. If you would like to get involved in any way, please do contact Grace. Her email address is there. If you're interested in the practice leadership program, please contact Ray. And I said that, sorry, I'm gonna, no. Okay. Stop scribbling on my screen.
Caroline, you are just amazing, and I know that there's people been really resonating with some of those key messages you've got, and I know that sometimes when we're doing brainstorming with teams, the first question is, what do you know about people? And I love that word, about knowing someone. It's not what do you know about their diagnosis? What do you know about it's what do you know about them? And I love the way that you keep coming back to that. And while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I was just wondering, while we're waiting for the fantastic Cora, what are some of the ways that you've seen, while you're doing your observations about ways that in the meantime we can be really grounding into that, keeping coming back to what we know and what we're learning about the person that we can be doing now.
Yeah, so it's about mindful practice, which is really difficult with the pace that we work at. You know, we work at a very unusual pace in our sector. And so we operate on bias a lot of the time. And they've researched this, and that's led to a lot of critical incidences. So, a lot of teams, if you've got good support, it's about making sure that you can talk to the people in your team. A lot of teams that I've talked to have, a teammate that they can talk to and reflect with. So it's really thinking about how to reflect in your practice in the moments that you've got, because otherwise we're on automatic pilot all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know Oliver's just saying, thank you. It's really inspiring because she's thinking in a big picture about education at the moment. And one of the things that I know that you touched on really briefly there was that idea about, we talk about training, and you see training as just being part of the picture, and there's learning that we need to be doing outside that formal training, isn't there?
Yeah, and I've been in the UK. I train many dementia champions, and practice leadership is a move on from dementia champion, and training is part of it. And some training is highly impactful, but the didactic type delivery is not from an evidence base. You know, when we're talking at somebody, that doesn't seem to work. But if training can work if it's delivered in a particular way, but most impact is on the ground. And so if we can cultivate a more kind of strategic approach to that through practice leadership that really leans into emotional intelligence, then we'll get a much better place. And my very talented Ray is here. He's just posting, I'm just seeing our relationship lead. So please do reach out to her. We're really keen to get this practice leadership going. It's been a long time in the making, and we'd really love support from our community to try and get it going.